and we're doing it. Iron Lion Radio. And today we are talking about the mental aspect of dieting. So I've been working on a video about building a diet from scratch, but it's taking some more time than I thought. And so today I want to talk about the mindset of dieting and save the other one for another day. And forgive me because this is a little bit out of order, because the first thing you need to be able to do is design a diet. That's sort of phase one. Phase two is then sticking to that plan. But phase two is the one that more people need help with. There are many, many people who can write a diet out on paper that will work, but there are far fewer people who are in excellent fitness shape. So there's a disconnect. And today we're going to talk about executing the game plan. And I bring this up because it's relevant to where I'm at with my diet right now. A few of my friends and I took before pictures on July 1st, and we're planning on taking after pictures at the start of the new year. So it's essentially a 6-month body transformation, but as a group. So right now we're under 7 weeks left. So if there was ever a time to be locked in on our diet, it'd be right now. And for today, like usual, something in the news actually sparked some thoughts that gave me this idea for the podcast. But this story that I saw actually had nothing to do with fitness or dieting. Recently, there was a story about a woman, and she was a murderer, and she was in jail in like Illinois or Indiana or somewhere in the middle of the country. And as a prisoner, this woman got really into history, and she pored over a ton of old documents and photos and actually made some significant discoveries. And when I read about this, I thought, well, yeah, if you're in a jail cell all day with nothing but time and you're interested in history, yeah, you could probably accomplish a lot. And if she had not killed her own child, she'd probably be a single mother raising a teenager in the depressed Midwest. And I'm guessing she wouldn't be this scholarly historian that she's at today. So obviously she's a terrible person, but how does the story relate to dieting and reaching your body composition goals? My thought was, nobody's going to come in and relieve me of my worldly responsibilities. It would be easier to diet if I was in a prison cell and 5 times a day someone brought me 8 ounces of fish and 3 cups of green beans and broccoli. And then 90 minutes a day they let me out so I could go to a gym. It would be easy because even if I had cravings, I'd have no access to any other food. But that's not how dieting works. You're never relieved of your own responsibility for self-control. There's no jail cell fitness boot camp. But if you start one, I want to cut because it would work. I can speak for only myself, so it's impossible for me to say whether like my cravings and my appetite are more or less than like your average person. And what the average person feels. But I think it's safe to say that there's a spectrum and that overcoming cravings and hunger are easier for some people than it is for others. But I think it's important to recognize that it's not easy for anybody. I think the general public looks at someone who is fit and they assume it was easy for him. They see a muscular guy and they say, oh, steroids. They see a really fit girl, they say, oh, she's naturally skinny. Or she must have an eating disorder. And that's like really my favorite one because an overweight female sees an exceptionally fit woman and says, eating disorder. Really? Is it the fit person who has an eating disorder? Or maybe is it the person who eats far more than their body obviously needs? Anyway, the whole female fitness scene is sort of like a topic for another day. But that'll be like an hour-long podcast, and that'll probably be my last episode when they come after me with the pitchfork. So we'll save that for later. But yeah, I think that people assume that it's easy for other people. And I think that the difference between someone who is a successful dieter and somebody who is unsuccessful is not a matter of how easy it is for them. I think the difference is the mindset. And I think the difference between success or failure on a diet is the mindset of that individual. Because someone can be successful at one point or another, and that same person, it doesn't align for them another time, and they're unable to be successful at a diet. Why was someone able to diet into fantastic shape 2 years ago, but right now they're trying and they're struggling? Same person. Like I said, I think it's the mindset. And when I think about mindsets, the person who comes to mind for me is Kevin Levrone. Kevin Levrone was a bodybuilder. He was an Arnold champion. He was Olympia runner-up a couple times. And when he was getting ready for a bodybuilding competition, he would sleep on the floor, no pillow, surrounded by guns and ammunition. And he did that so he would feel like he was at war, because that's what he needed to feel like. And you'll see a bunch of softies on the internet using, hashtag war on carbs. But that's not what he meant. He didn't mean he was at war with his food. He meant he was at war in the sense that he wanted to feel like a grunt in the military. He wanted to feel uncomfortable. Not because he enjoyed it, obviously, but because he needed to fully accept that this period in his life, this diet time, was not about comfort or what he wants or what his body is even telling him that it needs. This time is about accomplishing a mission. And that's what it took for him to get into that right mindset. And so my takeaway is not that you need to sleep on the floor. I'm not going to sleep on the floor. My takeaway is that you have to help yourself. I think it's very unlikely to say, I'm starting my diet on Monday, and then hope that over the weekend, the right mindset clicks in, and by Monday, you're set and ready to go. I think that's why people fail. They know the goal. They know how to get there. They make a plan. They go to start, but they weren't ready. And so what do I mean by that? I'm sure many of you know that there's, a million diet plans for sale. Every fit person on social media is selling the secrets to being as fit as they are. But if you plunk down $100 for a diet plan that you can't stick to, I think you're a sucker. Unless you're prepared to get real with yourself, you're not going to be successful. So what do I mean by getting real with yourself? I'm talking about the psychological and even spiritual aspect of fitness. And I don't know if I can explain what I mean by that. I was able to get control over my dieting demons by observing others. For example, friends of mine would say that they're on a serious diet. And then at the gym, they would tell me, oh man, I messed up so bad last night. I ate a whole pizza. But I'm back on low carbs today. And I say stuff like that too. So no judgment at all if you've said something like that. If you've tried dieting before, you have said something like that before. But I would say to myself, when my friends would say that, I'd say, he's trying to be shredded. He's trying to be shredded in 2 months. Why would he set himself back like that? And I don't have to ask, because the excuses will already start flying. They'll say, oh, I felt flat. I needed to carb up. I deserved a cheat day. I didn't have any food prepped. I couldn't say no. It was my wife's birthday. I mean, I could go on forever. And I like to say that I've never said any of those things, but they're very familiar because I've used them myself. But sometimes it's easier to see, it's easier to see through someone else's bullshit than it is to see your own. The reality is, when you go off the plan, you have to admit that your mindset was not as solid as it needed to be. So when I talk about getting real with yourself, I think everyone faces challenges that are different. So the process is going to be unique for everybody. But I'll talk about the process that I go through to make sure that I get inside the right mindset. It's at least just one idea of maybe what it could look like for you. So, the first thing I do is I ask myself, what is my motivation? So, what is my motivation for dieting? So this 6-month transformation that I'm on has actually been longer than that, actually. So I started dieting when my body weight got up to about 262. I decided that was just too heavy. It was time to bring my weight down. At first, it was my motivation to get my weight down because, I really don't think that I'll live to be 60 if I keep a body weight, around 250 or above. And I know that a lot of people think I'm being dramatic when I say stuff like that, but I'm not at all. People don't understand that carrying a lot of muscle on your body is significantly harder on your body than just being a big fatty. Your heart and your other organs, they don't work overtime to support your fat. It just sits on your body. But your muscular tissue has significant demands on your body. And, I'm not ready to give up the muscle quite yet. So the most I'm willing to do right now is just try to stay lean year round and keep my body weight below maybe 230 at the most. But I got down around that 230 mark, sometime around August, and the motivation changed because I was under 230 now. So I was satisfying that goal of getting my body weight down. So your motivation doesn't have to be something as altruistic as long life and health. It can be as selfish as vanity or showing off, which are what my motivations are right now. It's just important that I'm honest with myself what that motivation is. So first step is me asking myself, what is my motivation for dieting? The second thing I ask myself is, do I want this enough where it's worth it to make the sacrifices necessary to get there? And this is why it's a personal battle and not something that a coach can help you with. Because if I ask someone that question, do you want this enough? They will instinctively or even defensively say yes. But that question should never be an easy question to answer. Before starting a diet, it should be satisfying that question with a yes should take you a moment. If it's that easy for you to answer, yes, I want this so bad, then you're not mentally prepared for the sacrifices you'll be making. Because, and you're going to hear me say this a lot, it is not easy. And something that is this difficult should give you pause. And I had to ask myself that question twice. When I first decided to bring my weight down for the purposes of health and longevity, it didn't take me long to say, yes, I want this enough to overcome the hardships that come along with it. But when I asked myself the second time, do you want this? Do you want this enough for the sake of being shredded and to show your friends they can take control over their body composition? Do you want this enough to go through the sacrifices that you're going to have to go through to get there? And that's a harder one. And to be clear, it's not harder because the goals are, somewhat shallow in nature, it's a harder question to answer because the work it took to get from 260 pounds to 230 pounds is a lot easier than the work to get from 230 to even like 220. Never mind 210. If you've never done it before, you may benefit from the bliss of ignorance, but I knew it wasn't going to be a fun process, and I'd be sacrificing a lot to get super lean. So this time, I had to sit on it for a couple days and think about it thoughtfully. And this time I determined that, yes, it is worth it. So the first thing I asked myself is, what is my motivation for doing this? The second thing I asked myself is, do I want this enough to make the necessary sacrifices? And if I have answers to those two questions, that still doesn't guarantee success. I then have just an opportunity. But if I know what my motivation is, and I've determined I'm willing to make the sacrifices and start my diet, I'll still be unprepared and probably fall. Because just knowing that I'm motivated and why I'm motivated and thinking I'm prepared for the sacrifices, that is just giving me an opportunity. There's a third step. The third and most important part is a sort of visualization. And to go back, when I answered those first two questions about what is my motivation and am I willing to put in the sacrifices, those are things that I generally, like for me, those are things I think about when I'm laying in bed at night, when I'm driving, maybe in the shower, when I'm eating lunch in my office by myself. But this third step, the visualization, for me, this is more of like quiet time by myself, purposely thoughtful thinking. Maybe it's all the weed I've smoked, but I need to be like still and eyes closed and thinking deliberately. And if you're a first-time dieter, you may not be able to do this, and you'll see why in a second. But what I do is think about how I'm going to feel after 3 days of being on a strict diet. I think about the foods that I'm going to want. And what am I going to do when I want those foods? How will I feel about myself if I cheat? How will I feel about myself if I don't cheat? I think about those really rough nights where I feel like I'm mentally breaking and how I will react when that happens. And when I find myself in these situations, which I inevitably will, it's like I've practiced how to respond. Because without that preparation, at least for me, I know that I will not respond optimally and my mind will start to fuck with me. So for me personally, I try to figure out who I want to be on this diet. And I view myself, I think we all do this, as sort of the hero of our own movie. And the character that I want to play is someone who turns down the junk food. Someone who can have their favorite candy bar in the house and not eat it. So like 2 weeks ago, I bought a pint of Butterfinger flavored ice cream. And I put it in my freezer so that I could open the door every day and see it and say, no thanks. In my mind, I'm tougher than that. I open the door and I say, fuck you, ice cream. I'm a dieting savage and you will not break me. Because I choose to face it head on rather than try to avoid it because I find that to be impossible. Every day at work reminds me of that kids movie Heavyweights where the kids all went to fat camp. There's like a scene where they show all their candy stashes, and every day at work looks like that. It's just, there's so much junk food everywhere. And I embrace being the guy at work that turns down everything. And I embrace it because the alternative I already know doesn't work for me. I can't totally avoid all temptation. So you're either going to give into it all of the time, some of the time, or none of the time. Which one are you going to be? For me, if I hide from it, if I dread it, if I give each opportunity that comes about consideration, I'm going to end up in that some of the time category where I will give in to temptation some of the time. If I can feel each time I turn it down, if I can feel empowered, it will be a little bit of like positive reinforcement each time I do it. And I do this mental preparation, not just with dieting, but with training. You know, training surrounding being on a diet and the struggle to still train optimally when you feel shitty. So how will I react when I'm low on energy and I don't feel like working out? And this visualization or mental preparation is something I do throughout the process, not just at the beginning. In fact, all 3 steps are revisited regularly. You know, what is my motivation? Do I want it bad enough to make the sacrifices? And then continually visualizing success and what it looks like, and failure as well, and what that looks like, so that I'm prepared when these situations come about. Oh, but one more thing. So there is cheating on your diet, and then there's eating something typically high in carbs because it's when your body actually needs it. And you know that I am evangelical about low carb dieting. If you haven't watched the first episode I did about low carb dieting, you should go watch that. And I think I demonstrate my passion for it. But even I have to accept that there are times where carbohydrates, and I hate to even say this because it's exceedingly rare, but there are even times where something like ice cream or candy are what your body needs. But nobody is better at lying to themselves than someone on a diet, especially someone who's been on a diet for a while. So for me, I can't allow myself to make those kind of judgments when I may not be seeing things objectively. So before I get to a critical part of the diet, and in the case of my current diet, it was around the 10-week mark. So before I got to the 10-week mark, I asked myself, what are the circumstances that will require deviating from the game plan? And the answer is going to be different every time. But this time I answered that question by saying, if my muscles feel flat, like they're totally depleted of carbs, no glycogen in them at all, and I've been in keto for at least a week, go ahead, Andy, eat maybe 200 grams of a complex carb. So I use that once. After about a week, after week 10, I've been keto for about 10 days, felt extremely flat, and I ate about 200 grams of carbs from plain pasta. For junk food, I tell myself if I've gone at least 2 weeks in keto and my brain starts to hurt, like mentally it doesn't feel good up in the head, then something is wrong. That's a sign to me that my brain is trying to work off ketones and I'm not producing enough. So at that point, I just want to break ketosis altogether and consume some sugar. So what I'll do, if I get to that situation, because I haven't gotten there so far, thank God. If I get to that point and it's happened before, what I'll do is eat something like 2 packs of sugary gummy type candy and then right back into keto. Okay. So right now I feel really sharp mentally, but if that changes, I'll eat those 2 pieces or 3 pieces of candy and get right back into low carb. So this decision was made in advance. So there's no deciding if I qualify for that because there's a strict set of circumstances that have to take place for me to get to that point. So that's how I do it. And if you are a successful dieter out there and you have some tips for me, I would love to hear them. And if you have been an unsuccessful dieter, or if you really haven't made an effort yet, I hope that maybe there's something that you can identify with, at least as a place to start from. And, I'll say this over and over again. Dieting is not easy. And someone here in Saipan who I really like, he posted on his Instagram last week, getting big is easy. Just eat more food and lift heavy. And this guy is a personal trainer. He's a smart guy. He's got a good physique too. But he's definitely wrong here. Getting big, even, it's not easy. Now, he may really mean that it's simple. And that would be a better word. You can say dieting is simple too. Cut the carbs, do cardio, lift heavy, get shredded. Right? How hard could it be? It's that simple. Okay. So it's simple, but it's not easy. As I talked about last time, I've been powerlifting for more than a year now. And, powerlifting is just a lifting style. You could do it in conjunction with a clean diet or not. Powerlifting without watching your diet is for the physically strong but mentally weak. Fighting through a heavy lift is like 3 seconds of mental focus. Getting shredded is like a 3 to 12 month commitment of mental focus. But with that sacrifice comes great reward. So on my diet, I feel like I'm getting pretty lean. I do feel like I'm on track to accomplish, my goals. I think in 7 weeks, I'm going to look pretty good. And if and when I am able to accomplish that, I'll gain a great deal of confidence out of that. But the confidence that I gain is not going to come from being shredded. And it's not going to come from being a good example for my peers. Those were my motivation. But my confidence is going to come from the fact that I put my mind to it, I stayed focused, and I slayed the dragon. And I'm not going to say that you need to enjoy the journey, because that's so cliche. And in this case, it's like not even close to true. The process of dieting is not something you're supposed to enjoy. I think a better way of looking at it is that you need to prepare for the journey. Because if you prepare for it, it'll be more tolerable. And I think it'll set you up better for success. This is going a little longer than I planned on. I want to keep most of these things around 20 minutes. So I think I'll cut it off there. But we are going to talk a lot more about this. And I am definitely interested in hearing other people's thoughts on this. I do not consider myself a definitive expert on anything other than myself. So I hope you guys enjoyed the chat today. And I will see you guys in the next one.